A racist hotel owner bullies an elderly black janitor until Snoop Dogg gets involved. The first snow of the season fell gently over Crestview, coating the small town in a deceptive blanket of purity. From the window of her childhood bedroom, Ruth Johnson watched the flakes spiral down, each one a tiny messenger of time's passage. At 34, she hadn't expected to find herself back in this room, surrounded by faded posters and dusty trophies that seemed to belong to someone else's life. 3 weeks had passed since her father's stroke, and the temporary emergency return had morphed into something more permanent. The prestigious law firm in Chicago had been sympathetic at first, then increasingly impatient, until finally the choice became unavoidable: her career or her father. She chose the latter, resigning from the partnership track that had consumed the last decade of her life. "Ruth, are you up there?" Her father's voice, now permanently slurred on the left side, called from downstairs. "Coming, Dad." She straightened her shoulders, slipping into the caretaker role that still felt like an ill-fitting coat. Douglas. Mitchell sat at the kitchen table, his once commanding presence diminished by the stroke that had paralyzed half his body. His right hand trembled slightly as he attempted to open the newspaper. "Let me help," Ruth said, reaching for the paper. "I can do it." The words came out slower than they used to, but the stubborn pride remained intact. After a moment of struggle, he relented, pushing the paper toward her. Ruth unfolded it, pretending not to notice the flash of frustration in his eyes. The front page featured a story about the upcoming winter festival, complete with a photo of volunteers decorating the town square. Among them was a familiar face that made Ruth's heart stumble in its rhythm. "Is that Snoop Dogg?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Her father glanced at the photo. "Never left Crestview. Runs the high school music program now." A knowing look crossed his face. "Still plays that guitar too, at the Grand Horizon on weekends." Ruth nodded, ignoring the sudden warmth in her chest. Snoop had been her first love, the boy who composed songs about her eyes and promised forever under starlit skies. The boy she'd left behind without a proper goodbye when Harvard Law came calling. "Dr. Patel called," her father said, changing the subject. "He wants to see me tomorrow. Something about adjusting my medication." "I'll drive you," Ruth replied automatically, mentally rearranging her day. Douglas's expression darkened. "I'm not completely helpless, you know. Lisa can take me." Lisa Carter, her father's friend since high school, had been a constant presence since the stroke, offering rides and companionship that Douglas accepted far more graciously than anything Ruth provided. "Dad, I'm here now." "I want to help." "You don't have to be." His voice was quiet but firm. "Go back to Chicago, Ruth, to your real life." The words stung more than she expected. "This is real too," she said softly, turning toward the window. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing familiar landmarks and creating a landscape that was both recognizable and strange, much like the life she now found herself living. The Grand Horizon hadn't changed in the 15 years since Ruth had last stepped inside. The same elegant walls, the same scent of expensive cologne and fine wine, the same small stage in the corner where local musicians played for tips and applause. She hesitated at the entrance, second-guessing her decision to come. "Well, look what the snowstorm blew in," said a warm voice behind the bar. Bill Cooper, the owner, wiped his hands on a towel and came around to enfold Ruth in a hug that smelled of cinnamon and whiskey. "Douglas told me you were back in town, but I didn't expect to see you here." Ruth returned the embrace, surprised by how familiar it felt. "Temporary situation," she explained, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Bill gave her a knowing look. "Nothing in this town is as temporary as folks think. Have a seat, first drinks on the house." Ruth slid onto a bar stool, positioning herself with a clear view of the stage where a man was setting up equipment, his back to the room. Even without seeing his face, she recognized the set of those shoulders, the way he moved with a quiet confidence that had always seemed at odds with his rebellious exterior. "He still plays the old songs sometimes," Bill said, following Ruth's gaze as he placed a glass of wine in front of her. "The ones everyone knows are about you." Heat rushed to Ruth's cheeks. "I doubt he even remembers me." Bill's laugh was short and sharp. "Honey, Some people leave marks that time doesn't erase. Before Ruth could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, and Snoop turned to face the small crowd that had gathered. His hair was shorter now, touches of silver at the temples, but his eyes were the same intense brown that had once been the center of her world. When those eyes scanned the room and landed on her, the shock that registered on his face was unmistakable. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, Snoop adjusted his guitar strap and leaned toward the microphone. "Thanks for coming out tonight," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "I'm going to start with something new." The first notes filled the room, and Maya felt herself drawn into the melody, a bittersweet composition that spoke of return and remembrance. She couldn't tell if it was coincidence or if he was playing it for her, but either way, something long dormant stirred within her chest. After the set, Maya considered slipping away before he could approach, but she remained rooted to her seat. When he finally made his way to the bar, his expression was guarded. "Maya Chen," he said, sliding onto the stool beside her. "Last I heard, you were conquering the legal world in Chicago. And you're molding young musical minds here in Crestview," she replied, aiming for lightness but hearing the tension in her voice. "Someone has to teach them there's more to life than what shows up on their screens." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "How's Howard doing?" The genuine concern in his voice loosened something in Maya's chest. "Stubborn as ever. Hates that I'm here taking care of him." "That sounds like Howard. Remember when he caught us on the roof stargazing and pretended he thought we were burglars?" Maya laughed despite herself. He stood there with his arms crossed, asking very seriously if we'd found anything worth stealing yet, and then made us come in for tea, like it was a formal invitation rather than a busted curfew. Alex's smile faded slightly. "He's proud of you, you know. Never stops talking about his daughter, the big city lawyer." "Not anymore," Maya said quietly. "I resigned when I came back." Alex's eyebrows rose. "Temporary though, right? Once Howard's better." "If he gets better," Maya corrected. "The doctors aren't sure how much function he'll regain." A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of things unsaid. Finally, Alex spoke again. "I'm playing at the Winter Festival tomorrow. They're setting up a small stage in the town square. You should come. I don't know if—" "Just think about it," he interrupted. "It would be good for Howard to get out too." Before she could respond, he was called away by another musician, leaving Maya with the unsettling feeling that she'd stepped back into a life she no longer knew how to navigate. The next morning, Maya found herself at Crestview Community Hospital, not for her father's appointment, but for her own unexpected meeting. Dr. Sarah Wilson, an old classmate who'd returned to town after medical school, had called with an unusual request. "We're launching a legal aid clinic for patients," Sarah explained as they sat in her office. "Nothing complicated. Advanced directives, power of attorney forms, basic estate planning. Things that make a difference during health crises but that most people put off." Maya tilted her head. "And you want my help? Because you're a lawyer who understands both worlds. You've been through the healthcare system with Howard, and you know the legal side." Sarah leaned forward. "It would be part-time, just a few hours a week, mostly consultations and document preparation." "I specialize in corporate law, Sarah. Not exactly the same skill set. But you could learn. And in the meantime, your presence alone would legitimize the program." Sarah's expression softened. "Look, I know you're in limbo right now. This could be something meaningful while you figure out next steps." Maya stared out the window at the snow-covered hospital grounds. "I'll think about it," she said finally, knowing that the idea had already taken root somewhere inside her. By afternoon, Maya had convinced Howard to attend the Winter Festival, though not without resistance. "People will stare," he grumbled as she helped him into his coat. "Poor Howard Chen, walking like a drunk man, talking like he's got marbles in his mouth." "People will be happy to see you," Maya countered. "Besides, I heard Mrs. Abernathy is selling her famous apple cider donuts." Howard's expression brightened slightly. "The ones with the cinnamon sugar?" "The very same." The town square was transformed for the festival. Twinkling lights strung between lampposts, vendors in small wooden booths selling crafts and food. Children darted through the crowd, engaged in an elaborate game of tag, while parents clustered around fire pits, cups of hot chocolate steaming in their hands. Maya guided her father carefully through the crowd, hyper-aware of the ice patches, hidden beneath the snow. They found a bench near the small stage where Alex would perform later, and Howard sank onto it with a relieved, "Sigh, you two talk," came a voice behind them. Bill Cooper stood there, face ruddy from the cold, a thermos in his hand. "I'll keep Howard company for a while. Give him a break from his overprotective daughter." Something in Bill's tone made Maya pause, but her father was already brightening at his friend's arrival. "Go on," Howard said with a dismissive wave. "Find someone your own age to bother." Recognizing the dismissal for what it was, a chance at temporary freedom, Maya reluctantly left them and wandered through the festival. She found herself drawn to a booth, selling hand-carved wooden ornaments, each one a delicate testament to patience and skill. "These are beautiful," she said to the elderly vendor, a woman wrapped in so many layers of knitted scarves that only her eyes were visible. "My husband made them," the woman replied, her voice muffled. "Every year for 62 years, this is the first festival without him." Maya's hand, which had been reaching for a small wooden star, froze mid-air. "I'm so sorry for your loss." The woman's eyes crinkled in what might have been a smile. "Don't be. We had more time than most get, and he's still here in everything he created." She picked up the star Maya had been admiring. "Including this. You should have it." "Oh, I couldn't." "You can and you will," the woman insisted, pressing the ornament into Maya's palm. "Something tells me you need a reminder that beauty persists even when everything else changes." Maya clutched the star, its edges pressing into her skin as she continued through the festival. She was so distracted by the encounter that she almost collided with a tall figure rounding the corner of a booth. "Whoa there," Alex said, steadying her. "Lost in thought?" "Something like that," Maya admitted. She held up the wooden star. "A gift from a stranger with unexpected wisdom." "Oh, you met Mrs. Holloway?" Alex nodded. "First festival without Mr. Holloway. Everyone's been checking on her." "That's the thing about small towns, I guess. Everyone knows everyone's business." "Is that so terrible?" Alex asked, studying her face. "To be known?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Maya changed the subject. "Shouldn't you be setting up for your performance?" "On my way there now. Walk with me?" They fell into step together, navigating through the festival crowd. Maya was acutely aware of Alex beside her, of the way he automatically adjusted his pace to match hers, of the occasional brush of his arm against hers. "I heard from Sarah Wilson that she offered you a position at the hospital," Alex said casually. Maya shot him a surprised look. "News travels fast." "Small town," he reminded her with a grin. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It's so different from what I was doing in Chicago." "Maybe different is what you need." They reached the stage, where other musicians were already assembling. Alex hesitated before climbing the steps. "I meant what I said last night, Maya. Some things don't change, some people leave marks that time doesn't erase." Before she could respond, he was gone, joining his bandmates, leaving Maya to make her way back to her father with her thoughts in turmoil and the wooden star clutched tightly in her hand. The weeks that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Howard's physical therapy sessions became the backbone of their schedule, with Maya driving him to the hospital 3 times a week. Despite initial resistance, he was making progress. Small victories that medical professionals celebrated, but that seemed insufficient to Howard himself. "I used to build entire decks with these hands," he said one evening, staring at his left side, which still refused to fully cooperate. "Now I can barely hold a spoon." Maya looked up from the legal documents spread across the dining table, her first case for the hospital's new program. "The therapist said you're improving faster than expected." "The therapist doesn't remember who I was before." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Maya set down her pen. "I remember," she said quietly. "I also remember you telling me that the measure of a person isn't what they can do when everything's easy, but how they handle the challenges that seem impossible." Howard's eyes, so like her own, met hers with a mixture of surprise and grudging appreciation. "Using my own words against me. You really are a lawyer." A laugh bubbled up unexpectedly. "Yes, I am, even here." The moment of connection was brief, but real, a small crack in the wall that had existed between them long before his stroke. Maya turned back to her work, a case involving a young mother with terminal cancer who wanted to ensure her children would be cared for according to her wishes. The phone rang, interrupting her concentration. Howard reached for it with his good hand. "Chen residence," he answered, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. After a moment, his expression changed. "Yes, she's here, just a moment." He held out the phone to Maya. "It's your Chicago office." Maya's heart raced as she took the receiver. "This is Maya Chen." "Maya, it's Jonathan." Her former boss's voice was warm but businesslike. "We've had some developments here that I wanted to discuss with you personally." "What kind of developments?" "Barrett and Hodge is dissolving their Chicago branch. Their top clients are looking for new representation, and several have specifically asked about you." Maya gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not in Chicago anymore, Jonathan." "That's just it. We're considering opening a satellite office in the Midwest. Smaller market, but with potential. If you were interested in heading it up, we could look at locations that would allow you to remain where you are currently situated." The implication was clear. A path back to her career without abandoning her father. It was everything she should want. "Can I think about it?" she asked, aware of Howard watching her intently. "Of course. But don't wait too long. This kind of opportunity won't stay open indefinitely." After hanging up, Maya explained the call to her father, expecting him to be pleased. Instead, his face clouded over. "So you'd stay in Crestview, but not really be here," he said. "Always with one foot out the door." "That's not fair," Maya protested. "I'm trying to find a balance." "Balance," Howard repeated, the word sounding like an accusation. "Is that what you were looking for when you left 15 years ago? When you stopped coming home except for holidays? When your mother was sick and you were too busy with some case to visit until it was almost too late?" The words hit like physical blows. "That's not what happened." "Isn't it?" Howard pushed himself up from the table with effort. "Don't make decisions based on me, Maya. I survived before you came back, and I'll survive after you leave again." He made his way slowly toward the stairs, refusing her offer of help. Maya sat alone at the table, the legal documents blurring before her eyes. Her father's words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories she'd tried to bury. Her mother's final days, the calls she'd ignored, the regrets that still haunted her. Was he right? Had she always kept one foot out the door, afraid to fully commit to either world? With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone and dialed a number she now knew by heart. "Alex, can we talk?" The old water tower stood on the outskirts of Crestview, a relic from another era that had somehow escaped demolition. In high school, it had been the unofficial gathering place for teenagers seeking escape or adventure, a tradition that apparently continued, judging by the fresh graffiti on its base. Maya parked her car and spotted Alex already waiting, leaning against his truck, breath visible in the cold night air. He straightened as she approached, concern evident in his expression. "You sounded upset on the phone," he said without preamble. "What happened?" The familiar directness was comforting. Maya had spent the day wrestling with her father's accusations, with Jonathan's offer, with her own conflicted desires. Now standing in the shadow of the water tower where she and Alex had once carved their initials, she found herself struggling to articulate the chaos inside her. "My old firm offered me a position," she began. "A satellite office that I would run, potentially based here or nearby." "That sounds like a good compromise," Alex said carefully, watching her face. "That's what I thought. But when I told my dad," she trailed off, remembering Howard's words. "He basically accused me of always having one foot out the door, of not being fully present even when I'm physically here. Alex was quiet for a moment. And what do you think? Is he right? The question was gentle but probing, forcing Maya to confront truths she'd been avoiding. Maybe, she admitted. I've always been focused on the next thing, the next achievement. Even in Chicago, I was never satisfied with where I was. And now? Now I'm torn between worlds, between who I was and who I might be, between obligations and opportunities. Maya let out a frustrated breath. I think I called you because you're the only person who knew me before I started running. Alex's smile was tinged with sadness. You were always running, Maya, even back then. The difference was, for a while, you let me run with you. The simple truth of his words struck her silent. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, a lonesome echo carrying through the night. Why did you stay? She asked finally. In Crestview, I mean. You were talented enough to make it anywhere. Alex considered the question. At first, it was my mum. After Dad left, she needed someone. Then it became a choice. I realized I could make music anywhere, but community, real connection, that's harder to find. He gestured toward the water tower. Want to go up? For old time's sake? The metal ladder was cold against Maya's palms as they climbed, the rungs slippery with frost. At the top, the platform offered a panoramic view of Crestview, lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. I used to dream about escaping this place, Maya said, hugging herself against the chill. Now I can't tell if coming back is a step backward or forward. Maybe it's neither, Alex suggested. Maybe it's just a different path. A path to what? To becoming whole. Alex turned to face her fully. Maya, I've watched you these past weeks. You're different from the woman who left Crestview. You're softer around the edges, more present. The work you're doing at the hospital, you light up when you talk about it in a way you never did about your corporate cases. That's because it feels meaningful, she admitted. Directly helping people during their worst moments. Making a difference I can actually see. So maybe the question isn't Chicago versus Crestview. Maybe it's asking yourself what kind of lawyer, what kind of person you want to be. The clarity of his perspective was startling. Maya looked out over the town that had shaped her, then back at the man who had once known her better than anyone. When did you get so wise? She asked, a smile playing at her lips. Around the same time I got these, he replied, pointing to the silver at his temples. Wisdom and gray hair, the universe's package deal. Their laughter mingled in the night air, a moment of genuine connection that felt both familiar and new. As the laughter faded, Alex's expression grew serious. There's something else you should know. About your dad. Maya tensed. What about him? Bill Cooper came to see me last week. He was worried about Howard, but didn't want to tell you directly. Alex hesitated. Howard's been skipping physical therapy sessions, telling Bill to take him, then asking to go somewhere else instead. That's impossible. I've been tracking his progress with the therapist. According to Bill, Howard made some kind of arrangement with one of the assistants. They report progress, but he's not doing the work. The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. Why? Why would he sabotage his own recovery? Alex's expression was gentle but firm. Maybe for the same reason you're hesitating to decide about the job offer, fear. My father isn't afraid of anything, Maya protested automatically. Everyone's afraid of something, Alex countered. Howard's entire identity was built around being strong, independent, the provider. Maybe he's afraid of trying his hardest and still failing. Or maybe what? Maybe he's afraid that once he recovers, you'll leave again. The thought had never occurred to Maya, but as soon as Alex voiced it, she recognized its potential truth. Howard's insistence that she return to Chicago, his resistance to her help. Perhaps they weren't pride, but preemptive self-protection. I need to talk to him, Maya said, moving toward the ladder. Tonight. Alex caught her arm. It's past midnight. This conversation requires a clear head for both of you. Maya stopped, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow, Alex agreed. Then, still holding her arm, he added, Whatever you decide, Maya, About the job, about staying or going, make the choice for yourself. Not for Howard, not for your old firm, not even for me. The implication that she might consider him in her decision hung in the air between them. Maya felt a familiar pull, the echo of what they'd once been to each other, layered now with who they had become. I don't know if I remember how to choose for myself, she admitted softly. Alex released her arm, but his eyes held hers. Then, maybe that's the first thing you need to rediscover. The descent from the water tower was silent, each lost in thought. At the bottom, they stood awkwardly for a moment, until Alex surprised her by reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so achingly familiar that Maya's breath caught. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you already know what you want. You're just afraid to claim it." Before she could respond, he was walking to his truck, leaving Maya beneath the stars with a head full of questions and a heart that, for the first time in years, felt truly awake. The morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting a golden glow over the worn wooden table where Howard sat, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he struggled to complete a crossword puzzle. Maya watched him from the doorway, seeing not just the father weakened by stroke, but the man who had taught her to ride a bike, who had worked overtime to pay for her violin lessons, who had driven 14 hours straight to help her move into her dorm at Harvard. 7 across is tenacity, she offered, stepping into the room. Howard looked up, startled. "I knew that, just hadn't gotten to it yet." Maya poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "We need to talk about the physical therapy sessions you've been skipping." Her father's hand stilled, the pencil hovering above the newspaper. For a moment, Maya thought he might deny it, but instead, his shoulders sagged slightly. "Bill has a big mouth," he said, setting the pencil down. "Bill cares about you." "So do I." Maya took a deep breath. "Dad, why? Why sabotage your own recovery?" Howard was quiet for so long that Maya wondered if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You want the truth?" "I'm scared, Maya. Scared that no matter how hard I work, I'll never be the man I was. And scared that if I do improve, you'll take that fancy job offer and disappear again." The raw honesty was unexpected. Maya reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "Scared that I've spent 15 years chasing the wrong things. Scared that I'll make the same mistakes my mother's illness that I did during your stroke. Scared of disappointing you again." Howard looked up sharply. "You think you disappointed me?" "Didn't I? I left and barely looked back. I missed Mom's final months because I was too caught up in my career." "Maya." Her father's voice was stronger than she'd heard it since before the stroke. "Your mother and I wanted you to fly, that was the whole point. Giving you wings so you could go further than we ever did. But at what cost? I've been so focused on achieving that I forgot how to just be." Maya squeezed his hand. "I don't want to run anymore, Dad. I want to stay and build something here, something that matters." "The hospital job," Howard guessed. Maya nodded. "And maybe more. There's a need for accessible legal services in towns, like Crestview. People who can't afford big city lawyers but still deserve quality representation." A slow smile spread across Howard's face. "Like a local practice, Chen Legal Services has a nice ring to it." "Maybe someday," Maya agreed, surprised by how right the idea felt. "But first, you have to actually attend your therapy sessions. No more arrangements with the assistants. Real work." Howard's expression turned sheepish. "You drive a hard bargain, counselor." "I learned from the best." Maya stood and rounded the table, bending to kiss the top of his head. "We start fresh today, both of us." As she spoke the words, Maya felt a weight lift, the burden of expectations, both external and self-imposed, that she'd carried for so long. For the first time in years, the path ahead felt not like a compromise or a concession, but like a choice freely made. The following weekend, Maya found herself once again at the Timberline, but this time sitting at a table near the stage, her father beside her tapping his good hand in rhythm to the music. Alex's eyes found hers, as he stepped up to the microphone for his final song of the night. "This one's new," he said, his gaze never leaving Maya's face. "It's called Echoes Return." The melody was haunting, a story of departure and return, of time's passage and the enduring nature of connection. Maya listened, aware of her father watching her, of Elaine behind the bar raising a knowing eyebrow, of the way her own heart seemed to expand with each note. When the song ended, applause filled the room. Howard leaned over to speak in Maya's. "Sure, sir, that boy's still in love with you," he observed, no judgment in his voice. "Always was." Maya couldn't deny it, not the song's message, nor the way Alex looked at her, not even the answering feeling rising within her own chest. "It's complicated," she murmured. Howard shook his head. "Only if you make it so." After helping her father to the car, Maya returned to find Alex packing up his guitar. "That was beautiful," she said, suddenly shy. "The song." "Thanks." He secured the guitar case, then turned to face her fully. "I hear you turned down the satellite office. News did travel fast in small towns." "Yes, I'm staying, building something new here." "No regrets?" Maya thought about the call to Jonathan, about the path not taken, about the one she was creating instead. "None," she said, with certainty. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Alex's smile was warm. "That makes two of us." Outside, snow had begun to fall again, coating Crestview in fresh possibility. Maya looked up at the flakes swirling against the night sky, each one a tiny messenger of time's passage, not a reminder of what was lost, but a promise of what could still be found. "Walk me home?" she asked, extending her hand. Alex took it, his fingers warm against hers. "As far as you want to go," he replied. The words a promise and a question all at once. Maya squeezed his hand and stepped into the falling snow, ready at last to stop running and start building, a practice, a home, a life shaped not by expectation, but by choice. The weight of echoes from the past remained, but now they guided rather than haunted, creating harmony rather than discord. And for the first time in 15 years, that was enough, was.